Welcome to another OCD Recovery Instagram Live. I'm going to be talking a bit today about medication, and it's much easier for me to do these Instagram Lives than looking at the phone all the time and responding to so many messages and different things. So it's easier that I come on here, and I know you guys prefer often that I'm doing these videos and covering a lot more topics. So I'm going to be doing a lot more video and putting a lot more time into YouTube and doing a lot of videos on all different sections of OCD, because very much for me the future that I can see in what I do, so I reach a lot more people with anxiety, because so many people suffer and they don't have free stuff that's online to see. I'm going to be doing a lot more stuff on YouTube and different video platforms, so that people have got access to tons and tons of video footage for OCD, so that wherever you're based, in whichever country, those will be there. And I want to get lots of them translated, so underneath they'll be translated in different languages and of what I'm talking about with OCD. And I imagine I will also be looking to do more public speaking positions in terms of talking on a sort of a larger scale, either via virtual sort of seminar base, which is probably the best way, so I reach people in different countries who can't come to see me in person, as well as in person. Speaking on anxiety and OCD, I specifically want to broaden and do a lot of anxiety in general. I stay very specific to OCD because I think OCD needs a massive amount of awareness and needs so much work. So I will stay focused specifically with OCD, but branch out to do a lot more anxiety. And that's what I plan on doing in the next year, is a lot more of that. So I'll be trying to, at the moment we're setting up to do sort of online sort of seminars similar to our groups, but where a lot more people will be able to come and watch me talking about different sections on OCD and anxiety. And I think that will be good, because it will enable me to be able to reach the amount of people that message me and want help that I can't fulfill, because with just me, that's obviously limited to that. And so with myself, I don't hire anyone to help me do what I do. I do all of it myself. So doing that in that way will allow me to reach a lot more people, so that more people get helped. Because doing it even in the group format, it needs to go into more of a seminar format to reach more people, because I get sent so many questions all the time about OCD, and I want to be able to answer those, and I'll be picking out sort of broader questions, covering all of those topics, still doing loads of Instagram Lives and YouTube, but definitely moving into doing a lot more of that. Now today, what I was going to talk about is medication. And why does a high dose always tend to be to be suggested by doctors often, and what goes on there? Now, in relation to medication, I cannot advise on medication. I'm not a doctor. I can give us suggestions of how my own journey went and what to ask. So, in terms of that, medication is a situation where most people do not understand how OCD operates. That's reality. Okay, most people do not understand how it operates. Because of that, the treatment also will take time to get better, and the person, the doctor has somebody constantly coming into the coming in to see them, asking for medication, then getting referred to psychiatrists and so on, and keeps going to ask them for medication. So or for help. So their only answer is medication, because they haven't got the time and to do all the rest. And so medication is obviously a sort of instant handout. The same as how antibiotics have been handed out hugely, way overboard, and that's why we obviously have a risk of antibiotic resistance. And that's exactly the same with how meds are handed out for mental health. If we go back in time and we look at times where medication wasn't handed out so much. Exercise was prescribed, like in Russia, that was done a lot more. They prescribed a lot more exercise and so on as a thing. And a lot of that had great benefit. You obviously can't run away your OCD. It doesn't work like that. But it has huge benefits to balance out and take a balanced view. Do I need a lot more of this medication? Now, understandably, they will go very high doses on medication at first. Now, that can be helpful. Medication can be a lifesaver for so many people. And I am a huge advocate of medication, but it has to be rationally thought about, okay? So you do need to weigh it up. And that means what usually happens is people get put on a very high dose that they then find that when they bring it down, they're actually in a better position often on a lower dose than they were on a higher dose, feeling very sort of groggy and spaced out. But that has to be weighed up by you with the doctor. Now remember, if you keep saying to the doctor, I still feel terrible, often they will just keep putting it up. And when I say often, most of the time. So that's going to be what happens there. Now the other thing with medication is this. There is no cocktail of meds that's going to cure OCD. People spend years going from one drug to the next, one to the next, one to the next, online, all day, checking reviews, trying different ones. Nightmare. Because you've got to get used to one that's comfortable enough, not enough bad side effects, or the overall it's better than the side effects it's giving. And then that situation you want to stick with and then work on yourself. It's working on your beliefs. If your beliefs were rational and you were comfortable with uncertainty and changed your relationship with OCD and so on, you wouldn't be anxious. The only reason there's anxious is because of that's happening there. Obviously, the way the disorder functions is it's sort of that cycle is what we're deconstructing. It's there most likely genetically, and then it's deconstructed. What is that? It's just fear. So all I'm doing day to day, most of the day, is teaching people to see through the illusion of fear. That's all I do. Every day, talking to people about seeing through the illusion of fear. Rationally talking through why is something scary and why it isn't. And showing them, that thing's only scary because you haven't gone a little bit near it and built up a little bit, going a bit closer to it. That's it. It's what humans have been doing since the beginning of time. This is what we need to be encouraging. Talking to one another about fears. This is scary. Why is that not scary? Having a discussion, having a debate. That's what it is. Breaking down the things that we fear, discussing them, and changing our perception on those fears. There is nothing to fear. Nothing ever to fear. It's only our irrational beliefs that make us scared. Same as Viktor Frankl has said, same as Albert Ellis has said, same as the Greek and Roman philosophy has said through Stoicism. The only reason we are scared is because of our perception of it, not the thing. It's our perception that makes us scared. So that's what it's all about. So we need to change that and get better at that. But initially what happens is we focus sometimes way too much on the medication, whereas we need to get ourselves comfortable enough and then work on our beliefs. Now that's the first part on medication. Second part is benzodiazepines. This is a big problem, especially in the States. We see this huge amount. Overprescribed and the risks not weighed up. In the past, hugely addictive, everyone was recommended it, really bad situation. Now, it's still given out to people and it's not followed up properly. I see people regularly come to me that are addicts that have become completely addicted to benzodiazepine. Completely addicted. And they've told me that they went back to the doctor and they've been back to the hospital again and again, and they've been given diazepam and Valium time and time again, over and over again, just to sort of calm them down. And here you go, even when they were marked down on the system as being an addict. Now that is terrible. We see that time and time again. So that has to be watched. Now that's obviously not happening all the time, but it easily slips through. One, because they don't because the addiction takes over, and so they don't want to necessarily say, I'm addicted, or it's just missed, or somebody else has taken over and not noticed it, and so on and so on. So you've got to be very, very strict with those. Benzos are not a good idea for anxiety. If someone's absolutely having a really terrible time, really anxious in the short term, yes, it has its benefits. Long-term benzo use is constantly debated in forums. It's a very bad idea. People think that you can go on a low dose for a long time. I have seen so many people come off that after being on a low dose for so long, and it's a struggle at first. It's got lots of withdrawal symptoms and so on, and it's not healthy. So it's you've got to take that seriously. Benzos are a real problem out there. They are a real problem, and they're like a wonder drug for us because they work so quickly. But obviously they build up addiction very quickly, and then it wears off too. So people are actually staying on like a placebo effect for 10 years when they're taking Valium on a small dose, not realizing that it's actually not doing anything for them, and they're on such a low dose anyway. So that needs to be very, very much watched. It's not watched enough. It's a big problem, and it's I'm constantly talking about it to change that. Now, medication itself is very important in the OCD recovery journey for many people. I've seen people's lives change from it. I've seen people very resistant to taking it because fear of going crazy, losing control, being weak for taking it, and so on. But it's always, I see so many great stories. I see stories where people didn't like it, didn't get on well, whole mixture. I never took medication myself, just out of personal choice. If I look back, it would have been better for me to have taken medication because it would have made the journey a lot easier at points. So I don't think that would have been a bad idea. But again, I had an irrational belief there I thought it was weak, so I never did that. Had I been speaking to myself in the past, I would have a very different view of that situation. So I think that's very important. I think that you want to, whatever medication you're on, you want to review it as you go along. The goal isn't to be on it long term, but if you are, it's not the end of the world. People function on it and live on it. But there's things to factor in. Your medication can stop working at certain points. That can happen. So you want to, when you're feeling good, working on yourself. That's why I also tell people with OCD, when they're feeling good, that's when they want to be working on themselves, because if they wait till they're just feeling bad, they're going in for a crisis. Same as preventative healthcare. You want to prevent things rather than wait till the crisis. So I think that's really important. Let's have a look if there's any questions here today, which I'm sure there will be. How funny, I've just woken up for a nap. Always nice to see you. Very nice to see you. Thanks for joining today. Let's have a look here. What's the difference between accepting uncertainty and just winging life and not being cautious at all? Well, you're going to be cautious. You've got OCD. It's not like you're going to just start driving down the road the wrong way. So it's about going along, taking risk. We don't factor in the risk that's involved in life all the time. There's risk everywhere in life. Okay, there's serious risks involved in life. We could get a disease, we could get run down, we could have a crash, we could have a fit of some epileptic fit just out of nowhere in a vulnerable position. Anything can happen in life. There could be a war, there could be a virus, coronavirus wipes us all out. Technically, I'm using that as an example, not that I think it's going to wipe us all out. I'm saying all of these things that could happen. So there's risk, that's life, but we think we're safe because we're in a house and warm and safe and all these things, but we're not. I was on 60 milligrams of fluoxetine after breakdown. Bonkers. It's helped me over a big jump, but couldn't sustain it. Still on 23 years in. Would love to get off it. Yeah, well, you can get off it, but it just takes a bit of time, and you've got to focus on where you are so far and how well you've done and where you're going to get to. So I think that's a very, very important part of that journey. Instead of focusing so much on the difficulty what you're still on, don't be too concerned about that. That is part of the journey. The OCD recovery journey has a lot of difficulties in it. And so you want to give yourself a helping hand with that along the way. So don't be too hard on yourself for that. And sometimes we have to go back on meds. Sometimes we go off them and so on throughout the journey. No problem whatsoever. It's frustrating, yes, side effects and so on. But overall, in the long run, I'm sure you will come off it. Does anyone think that medication gets rid of the positive side of OCD, like being very organized? OCD doesn't really have a positive side, okay? Now, let me make this clear, because this is something that most people do not understand. OCD, the disorder, does not have a positive side at all. Zero. No positives in it whatsoever. What happens is that OCD lives in black and white thinking, very sort of rigid thinking, which we have in our personality. Okay? So that is the kind of traits we have. But the OCD itself doesn't have any benefits. It is a disorder, right? But our personality and our thinking sort of maybe very sort of cautious, maybe sort of quite rigid on certain things, so we get work done very well, or we're on top of things and we're watching for detail. That's our personality. That's not the disorder. So I think that's an important thing to notice. The actual disorder doesn't do that. Why do I feel tired all the time? Because you're fighting a war in your head. When you have lots of blank headspace, whereas before it's been very busy, is this a positive step in recovery? Yes, of course. If you've got a lot, but when I recovered, I thought, fucking hell, what am I going to do with my life now? I've spent all this time thinking and working things out. Now I haven't got to do that. Jesus, how boring this amount of time is. Not boring, but like, what am I going to do with it all? And like, I was so used to, almost felt like having another person there. There's no positive, agree. Stockholm Syndrome, absolutely it's a Stockholm Syndrome condition. How do you deal with getting past one obsession, another popping up, and not realizing it for a while? Well, it's going to move around. It's a bit like an antibiotic, and with a bacteria that's sort of trying to change and morph around the antibiotic. That's a bit how it operates. So when it's moving and shifting, often that's because we're improving and it's trying more and more to latch and catch on. I feel a sense of responsibility if I don't do my compulsions. How do I fight that? Well, we have to break down what you're scared of and that heightened responsibility and give you an understanding of all that and why you're doing that. Then when you understand that, that will help you with the journey towards getting better. So I think that's a very, very important part. Thank you for continuing to bring awareness to benzos. Absolutely. Jessica, you're somebody who's spoken out on benzos a lot to OCD community, and I think you have a great story. So if even on this Instagram live now, if you want to write in a paragraph a little bit about your benzo journey, I think that's great, because benzos, when you finally find that you've been sold a lie and you've been taking them for a long time, not knowing and not being organized, so the person helping you is not being organized with that, I think that's really important to know, because there's a lot of people going through that. Does OCD get my energy back? It sounds like a bit that you're scared of not getting your energy back. That sounds a bit of the problem. Jessica, my father and myself have struggled with that addiction, and I worry that his doctors don't realize he mixes it with alcohol. Mixing with alcohol, obviously very, very dangerous, and happens a lot, and is a cause of many suicide, many deaths, especially when we read about celebrities dying in the paper and so on. It comes down to these kind of situations. Where they've been taking recreational drugs, mixing benzos and alcohol, and suddenly, boom, you have a big problem. I would have gone on medication, but had no idea it was OCD. That's very common too, because it's very, very hard to realize that it's OCD, because you don't feel like something suddenly changed. You just think it's the way you're thinking. I got so much better after 2 months of recovery, but now I have had a major setback. Do setbacks stop eventually? Yes, they are all along the journey. The journey of OCD recovery has lots of peaks and troughs, and those peaks and troughs get shorter all the time. But then you can sometimes have your worst days followed by your best days, and vice versa. So those peaks and troughs move around. So we're sort of it goes up like that towards recovery. So I wouldn't be too concerned about lots of setbacks. Not the end of the world. Setbacks happen all the time. I had many setbacks, many times where I thought, fuck, I'm right back at square one. There is no square one, as I often say on here. Square one is an illusion. There is no such thing as square one. Square one is something that you can never have. Like, even say, what's square one in time? Like, even before I've started doing this Instagram live, by the end of it, I'll have learned something by maybe the questions or whatever. Not learned something to change my view on OCD, but I'll have learned something about the person or about their experience, and those will be information that I didn't have. So there is no such thing as a square one. I was given them as a placeholder when actually I needed more of a balance. Behaviour work is so important, and though it's tough to do that work, it's the only thing that really gets you better. Absolutely, Jessica. Absolutely. Just thought I was a monster. Yeah, that's the common one, especially with harm OCD and POCD. I often talk about how POCD is probably one of those, is probably one of the largest contributors of suicide without anyone knowing it. Often whenever I see a celebrity who's committed suicide, I think, well, if it latched on and they didn't know it, and then based on their position, who could they tell? I could see very likely that could be the case. POCD is, people aren't going to say someone can just develop it at 16-year-old virgin girl can to get it, and she's in a very devout Christian family where she doesn't want to tell anyone anything, and so she takes her own life because she can't think of speaking out. Those stories I hear all the time, not talking about the suicide, but those circumstances where the person is very lost and alone, and that is very, 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 very common because of how POCD gets in there. It's very sad. Does acceptance and exposure work together? Acceptance and exposure is part of the same thing. We're facing a fear and we're seeing it for what it is, so that their illusion of fear is gone. And then we can accept it. The brain can digest it. The brain can't digest when someone says, all right, just accept that maybe you've got cancer, and then the person thinks cancer is the scariest thing in the whole world. The brain's not going to be able to swallow that in, so to speak, because it will just be like, oh my God, I'm about to die. This is terrible. This is the worst thing ever. So it's got to be able to break them down until they can make peace with it, and it can sort of go in, and then they can sit and relax. That's part of the process. How long do sessions usually last? I feel like I've had mine for longer than that. Don't worry about how long you've had them. Some thoughts I had stuck for years. Some morphed and changed every day. Doesn't matter. It's all the same thing. Any other questions that you want to ask me today, guys? I will cover those now. Anything OCD related at all, you can ask on here. Even seeing my face in this phone reflection in the mirror behind me would have been something that in the past used to actually trigger me with a solipsism related, where I'd stand in like a mirror where it would have like two mirrors, and you'd see like the reflection like 100 times of yourself going into the distance. Often was in like a restaurant bathroom or something. You'd see that mirror and then you'd see like 100 of you. And I used to then think, well, what if there's thousands and millions of me out there in the universe and I'm not real and an illusion and so on. Those kinds of different things were triggers. Did I have anxiety symptoms like depersonalization? Absolutely. In reference to like that solipsism I was talking about, tied in very well there, because then I was feeling like, oh my God, I've got depersonalization symptom and the solipsism feeling. It's definitely real. That sort of authenticates it, all this kind of stuff. How can I explain my relationship OCD to my girlfriend that might help her understand? I don't want to scare her, but hiding compulsions doesn't help. Just to show her on the internet, show her on these Instagram lives and my page. There's loads of videos. I've got a video up on YouTube explaining all about our OCD. I've got lots of videos on there for families and friends. She'll be able to get it. You don't need to keep going into it in loads of detail. You've got to accept that maybe she won't, but just give her a bit of a background if you want to do that. Don't have to. Difference between accepting uncertainty and just being like, that one's already been answered. How did you recover? Did you suffer from depression? I didn't suffer from depression. My recovery is detailed on this page. There's quite a lot to it, so I won't be able to do it just in a quick question on here. Any other questions? Maybe not. Maybe no more questions today. All right, guys, I will see you on the next Instagram Live, and I will speak to you then. Take it easy.